Divine Grace, founder of Iskana Bhakti-Charananda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, Granthara Shrimadbhagavatam ki, their most merciful Lordship Shri Shri Radhakunja Bihari ki, Shri Jagannath Shri Baladev Mai Subhadra ki, Shri Nathaji Shri Balagopal ki, Shri Shri Varnitai ki, Nitai Go Prema. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the Lord's feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatim Vyasam Todayam Nasta Praishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtaki. Reading from Shrimadbhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, Text 2. Is that right? Sutta Uvacha Brahma Nadyam Sarasvatyam Brahma Nadyam Sarasvatyam Ashrama Pashtime Tate Ashrama Pashtime Tate Samya Prasha Iti Prokta Samya Prasha Iti Prokta Vishinam Satra Vardhana Vishinam Satra Vardhana Sutta Vacha Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam Ashrama Pashtime Tate Ashrama Pashtime Tate Ashrama Pashtime Tate Samya Prasati Prokta Samya Prasati Prokta Samya Prasati Prokta Rishinam Satrabhardhana Rishinam Satrabhardhana Vishinam Satravardhana. Please chant.
Sutta Uvacha
Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam Ashrama Pashtime Tate Samya Prasati Prokta Rishinam Satravardhana. Sutta Vacha
Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam
Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam
Ashrama Pashtime Tate
Ashrama Pashtime Tate
Samya Prasa Iti Prokta
Samya Prasa Iti Prokta
Rishinam Satravardhana
Rishinam Satravardhana. Sutta Sri Sutta Uvacha said, Brahmanadyam, on the bank of the river, intimately related with Vedas.
On the bank of the river,
Brahmanas, saints and the Lord. Sarasvatyam, Saraswati, Ashrama, cottage for meditation. Pashtime, on the west. Tate, bank. Samyaprasha, the place named Samyaprash. Iti, thus. Prokta, said to be. Rishinam, of the sages. Satravardhana, that which enlivens activities. Sutta Vacha Brahmanadyam Sarasvatyam Ashrama Pashtime Tate Samya Prasati Prokta Rishinam Satravardhana. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Bhai Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami. Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Suda said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samyaprash, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages. Please repeat. Sri Suta said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samyaprash, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages. Sri Suta said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samyaprash, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages. Purport by His Divine Grace, Abhayacharnadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. For spiritual advancement of knowledge, a suitable place and atmosphere are definitely required. The place on the western bank of the Saraswati is especially suitable for this purpose. And there is the ashram of Vyasadeva at Samyaprash. Srila Vyasadeva was a householder, yet his residential place is called an ashram. An ashram is a place where spiritual culture is always foremost. It does not matter whether the place belongs to a householder or a mendicant. The whole Varnashram system is so designed that each and every status of life is called an ashram. This means that spiritual culture is the common factor for all. The brahmacharis, the grihastas, the vanapras, and the sannyasis all belong to the same mission of life, namely realization of the Supreme. Therefore, none of them are less important as far as spiritual culture is concerned. The difference is a matter of formality on the strength of renunciation. The sannyasis are held in high estimation on the strength of practical renunciation. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshusu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We're seeing here the guidance given by sannyasis, that there is guidance to be given by the sannyasis, and that is that they help the householders to remain in that consciousness, which is saying is the aim of all the ashrams, is the spiritual development of the souls. So we have to be reminded, because we have responsibilities in this world that's keeping us connected to this world. And if we're not reminded, then the mind wanders off onto all these things we have to use in the world. Whereas the sannyasi is reminding us that Krishna holds all things in his hands, and if we keep our minds on Krishna, then everything else will be taken care of. I was realizing this morning, we're keeping track of time according to the Christians' view of their spiritual master having come to the planet 2,025 years ago. And there's two ways of looking at this event then, 2,025 years ago, that took place. On the one hand, just like Krishna, when Krishna comes on the planet, then his most immediate associates have the purest form of the instructions that he is giving to humanity at large for the age, you could say, when he comes, or for a particular time and circumstance that he's coming for. And so those sages, as they pass down the knowledge, From a Krishna conscious perspective, we are aiming towards it getting bigger and bigger and bigger and better by the holding of these precepts together and keeping them in their original form. What is happening, and what has happened also within, we might say even our own movement is happening, there's a watering down that takes place after. In its purest form, this renunciation is kind of born into the society as a whole, right? But as time goes on, those members of society that become wealthy, they kind of separate themselves and develop the consciousness that they're better from others. But there is that evaluation that if they use their life for the aid of society's development spiritually, then actually they are in a position to be considered better. So we offer respect to those that are enabling us to continue our walk in spiritual consciousness. And the whole society there kind of respects itself, one another, where this is how we offer respects to each other, but more so the super soul who is within us. Now, this particular dwelling, I'm sure, is still there, but I don't know that Mother Saraswati in this time of Kali Yuga is even flowing now. But she may be restored. See, all these things that we have lost from Krishna's original visit to the planet can be restored by, once again, Krishna consciousness being restored. What brings societies up to a standard that will allow them to experience happiness is the amount of effort they apply with each other towards developing love within the society, cooperation within the society, education within the society, and all these things. But if the society itself wanders off into making more important the self, the false ego then takes over. And this is what we're seeing the result of now. Without this understanding being given to children at a very young age, the older we get, the more difficult the forces of the false ego encumber us and blind us from being able to see things as they are. That possessiveness, then, it doesn't just enter into that things which we need, then it becomes a part of what we want. I want this, I want that, I gotta have this, I gotta have that, when we really don't. And then it affects our perception of who we are, our abilities to function as a human being without our connection to the material energy, which is all going to keep us here bound up in a cycle. The better a job we do within the material energy gives us more reason to come back into the material energy. So this is why the consciousness is so important to know why we are doing what we're doing. Because we might take on the same kind of activities, planting crops. Karmis are doing that. I say karmi. This might be looked at by some people as disparagement of a class of people or a group of people. But the term karmi actually means a person who is working for fruit of results. But they're doing that with the intent of being able to do that following the Vedas. So that's kind of built into the term karmi. They are fruit of worker, and they are hoping to get some return in exchange for their labors. And they may not necessarily see in the totality the aim that society should have in working with one another. But because they're acting according to the principles set forth in the Vedas, they make spiritual advancement. And so in this age, although in previous ages, a soul, by the controlling factors that society had set up for itself, a soul was entrapped in that particular varna it got born into. If you were a Sudra, you were a Sudra for life. If you were a Vaishya, you were a Vaishya for life. You were a Brahmin, born a Brahmin, you're considered a Brahmin, whether qualified or not, or whether overly qualified or not. But in this day and age now, Krishna is opening up the consciousness of human beings to the idea of a form of equality, that on the one hand, we're all equal, but then on the other hand, we're all individual and different as snowflakes. But the individuality can be looked at from a perspective of the false ego, but it can also be looked at a perspective of that which adds to the completeness of the whole. So when we're working together for the whole, we fit as a puzzle piece. But if the puzzle pieces all run off to form their little tiny puzzles, nobody will have the complete picture. This is what society is set up into these statuses for each of them to work together for the end result to be the same aim each of them are having. And ultimately it's a vague aim to please God. But that can take on so many different individual forms. One person's making garlands, one person's swapping them and mopping them. Another person is preaching, another person is distributing books. But all for the same end, so that society can make advancement. And in Krishna consciousness, so that we can preserve in its original form, like it was last time I gave class, talking about the original form that the seeds have been given by. When you analyze human beings' existence on the planet, they're totally dependent upon the food. For existence means they have to have favorable environmental circumstances to be able to plant foods, unless foods originally grew wild. They were all freed. And you can see in all of these plants, just like today, I peel a potato. But if you don't peel that potato, it's going to start producing on its own. These little sprouts come out, we call them the eyes, right? And it doesn't need another potato to do that with. So this is another latency. Everything we can look at in nature, revealing various aspects of the soul that we also have, that we have lost by death and birth and death and birth. And I'm this and I'm that. I'm a dog, I'm a hog, I'm a rat, I'm a cat. And these things have all taken us in our consciousness away from who we originally were, who we originally are, what the soul, substance, and potencies and abilities are, by believing and being clothed with the covering that the material body is. So by giving ourselves over the senses of the body, then the body, in effect, persuades us that we are it. We are the body. We believe we're the body. I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm old, I'm young, I'm diseased, I'm American, I'm Russian, I'm German, and none of this is reality at all. And how many living beings are covered with all these designations they give to themselves? Just think about that. A person living in the United States He doesn't only consider himself an American. He considers himself a political persuasion, which puts him into another idea about the self. Puts him into another classification of people that believe in certain things about whether there should be such a thing as abortion. Puts him into another class of people. And we divide ourselves, separating ourselves by our consciousness, by the things we believe in. And some of those things we believe in so strongly that we're willing to die, considering those principles to be more important than other people's lives that we're willing to take who don't believe those principles are important. This is what war is all based on. So this is how education can be the cause of doing away with war. Because if we both believe in the same cause, and in effect, I've said this before too, and I keep repeating myself because if you give class so many times, there's so many things you can say before you start repeating yourself. But both sides, in their minds, they're fulfilling that requirement they believe is their responsibility to God. In some cases, the Muslims, practicing Islam, they believe they're fulfilling their requirement, their responsibilities to God. Now, amongst the group of people calling themselves Islam, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 10 different groups believing that they shouldn't be using these bombs to kill the rest of the infidels with, and they believe that they should argue with words of God, rather. And so they divide themselves in that way. But it's a fight still, it's a fight. And rather than fighting amongst ourselves, these scriptures are given to us to lift each other up. And yet they're being used to break each other down. I'm better than you are. My group's better than your group. We believe the truth more than your truth, and our truth is more true than your truth. All these are like kindergarten mentalities, isn't it? When you see society growing up, the adults are not much different than the kids are, really. We're fighting wars for the same cause the kids with their plastic toys are fighting each other. Same thing, only bigger weapons, more destructive, and has nothing to do with human development. Psyche, they say, all this ability to fight and kill each other's, abilities that we have, but in the spiritual world, there is no such activities going on. Maybe as a form of play. They enact pastimes of Krishna, but there is no such thing as death even there. So why learn the things that have no true eternal existence? It's all those things we're learning about here that will perish when this place perishes also. And even the most exalted positions probably could be looked at as the most useless. A banker counting money. Money doesn't exist in the spiritual world, It's a function we're performing here, and the relationships, it's what, even in those kinds of professions, the relationships that people are automatically having with each other causes the soul to be forced to develop and make advancement by that development of character that they get. They develop patience, meekness, kindness, gentleness, these kinds of things, understanding, which turn into wisdom. But if it's not leaning towards the ultimate end of love of God, it's not going to have the same effect as love of God would. It won't affect God's own feelings, God's own part of whether he wants to put us in a place where we can be using more of our spiritual abilities that we have access to. That's the real reason to be able to develop these abilities of the senses in the spiritual realm is to be able to communicate that experience to the rest of the mankind that we're coming in humankind that we're coming in contact with. And without that aim in life, we're just continuing further in the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, and making our life. We can sing songs more beautifully. We can be actors more perfectly, displaying qualities of life that are meant to be displayed spiritually, but ultimately with that intent of what we get in our minds as what is perfection. When we're all aiming at that, together. And the meaning of sin, in Artha, is simply not hitting the direct target, not hitting exactly in the spot aimed at. So as long as part of humanity is not aiming at the same spot, we're not going to be experiencing the completeness that we could be. And this philosophy is so all-encompassing that it can, in fact, satisfy those people whose minds are filled with desires to know God and the various aspects of God's personality. Because when Krishna comes, he kills, but then he reveals that there is no such thing as death. But he just ends that function that the particular soul is taking part in to that point in their life and gives them the next place they belong in. So he can either deprive us of what we're using because we're using it wrongly against his cause, which would be reasonable, right? If someone's working against you, you want to do everything you can to stop their annoyance. And this is the way the laws of karma are automatically working. If we're annoying God by our activities, it just stands to reason that he's got to do something to stop us from doing that. So he is so ingenious that he's made a situation for us to get punished with and to think we're enjoying it. That's what this human thing is going through, this human body is going through, a form of punishment. But we're enjoying it all the more. We get a little relief here and there. But this place is just as much punishment as it is pleasure. But the spiritual world is all pleasure. It's bliss. The very substance is bliss. So there's no means of being able to experience distress and all these anxieties that we go through here, which reveal to some extent some feeling of separation that we may have even there. But it is nothing. I don't know that there is any language to be able to equate experience. Because even if I say a word that describes what I believe I'm feeling, it will mean something completely different to you. You know? And even, we don't know, but what I think is black, in your mind, you may see it as a completely different color than what I'm seeing it. This is the variety Krishna can take within us to have his own pleasure with each of us, even in the forms of punishments he puts us through. He can take pleasure in that. When we see someone we call justice, right, suffer because they've done something wrong to someone, especially if it's caused death. There's a form of satisfaction that Bhaktivinoda Thakur brings out in the responsibility he had as a magistrate. He was looking at it as his own weakness as a human being, taking pleasure in the punishment of another. But in effect, there's a way of looking at punishment as well. The more punishment a soul is given by the laws of this land to have to suffer here, the less all that suffering will be deducted from what they have to suffer in the next time around. So, even capital punishment can be looked at from that perspective as a form of mercy. But see, we look at it from a human perspective because we are ourselves subject and are afraid of dying. It's the mood that keeps us wanting to live. So we see that punishment as cruel, as something because we don't want to have to suffer that. But when, in fact, according to the laws of karma, it is a form of mercy to prevent that soul even from having to go to a more severe form of hell. And there's all kinds of layers of hell, just as there are all kinds of layers of loving relationship with Krishna, mixed and blended with pleasures of this world, that the soul ends up in heavenly planets, but there are all different layers of heavenly planets. Just imagine how many layers of devotion there are, and just how many devotees there are. We all have different rates or different levels we are willing to surrender ourselves to. And so similarly, there are strata of heavenly realms, all made for the ability for those souls to go into those realms that have reached that level of advancement, or deserving, you might say, of pleasure or punishment. But then when someone who says they believe in the same God that we say we believe in, and they say, no, there's a hell that is a lake of fire, and there's only one, and everybody that doesn't believe in God gets thrown into that one fire eternally with no means of getting out whatsoever. This is what the Bible is portraying, that the minds of the people had, who were let out of the bondage of slavery from Moses, brought all the way down into this period of time now, that they're still believing in this way. That there is only one dwelling called hell, that is a massive lake, that all the souls that are disobedient to God get thrown into eternally, after living this one little period of time for 100 years, as they see, and they don't see, they may see 1,000 years as the extent a life can last, and they think of that as the longest a soul can live on this planet, approximately 1,000 years, right? And so how cruel does that give people the impression that God would be with that? Having an eternal place, never to be able to be freed from whatsoever, no matter how little or how big the crime as well. It's being looked at as the same, because the punishment of hell is all described as just a burning fire that you enter into. So how must that make Krishna feel about who's representing him and how he's being represented? And does he want that kind of representation? That's why this movement is so important. For this movement, which we have the powerful knowledge of, to be able to clear the minds of these atheists of the perverted reflections that have been created in their minds about God's nature, who God is, what his activities are, how he feels about other human beings. But we don't have that because we have more in government places controlled by the false ego, without the ability to see perfectly well all the laws of karma functioning for the benefit of souls. And those souls that don't get that knowledge, they don't get that knowledge because they are running away from it. So Christians, we can see They are deceived to a great extent because of their own lack and pursuit of wanting to know. You don't have to go very far to look, if you have an open mind, to look and find out how the Bible was put into English. A book called The Dead Sea Scrolls. If you just read that simple little book, it's an introductory book to the book they're reading to be considered the one and only book of God. Christians consider the Bible to be that. That even many of them hold that it should be the only book read by human beings, right? But in order to be able to be proclaiming that, it would seem only reasonable that they would do thorough research to find out if what they're in fact proclaiming is in fact true. And so when you do look into how these so-called scriptures were brought into existence, you come to find out that it's not necessarily how you originally thought it was. Then the sincere soul finding these things out and starts to question, gets kicked out. If you ask the wrong questions in Christian circles, they will see you as an outcast. And they will shun your presence. And then they will speak behind your back about you. And this is how religions got divided against each other, and nations against each other, by people being against each other. And so Krishna consciousness has the means, the ability. See, as time goes on, rather than the philosophy being watered down, because Krishna has invested all of his spiritual energy in these names, it should be increasing. Because the more people we talk to about Krishna consciousness, the more people start applying these principles, the less cows will be killed, the less drunkenness there will be with people driving their cars while they're in that state of mind. The less women will have to fear men because of rape and everything else that is encouraged by the allowance of illicit activities that don't need to be indulged in for men to find satisfaction. And the soul is led to know the value of the scriptures. Every bit of longing the soul has for pleasure in the world will be satisfied once the soul becomes purified and leans its aim again towards that same end that we're all supposed to aim towards, which is love of God. No matter it would seem what group we do talk about, when we do say love of God, it would seem reasonably that there is incorporated into that sense of what love means, that is definitely, probably, if not the best, at least one of the best things that should be developed in a human being, right? Love. But where do you see the pursuit to know what pure love is? In any high educational system, is anything being taught about love at all? Family love, children are not taught in even grade schools. They're supposed to be taught at home by their parents, who are themselves working in a full-time job, having to pay people to raise their children for them because they don't have enough time to spend with their children, educating their children the way they want their children. And then the children are left for their own peers to share their opinions about what life should be, and then they form their own opinions based on that. And then in American society, the same way marriage is brought up, by the child's mind looking for its satisfaction in other members of society that it has no knowledge whatsoever of. This is why arranged marriage is much better for society to be able to deal with the need of relationships to be understood and the effect of relationships to be realized. Because then society will find its satisfaction in all of its dealings. Because even going down to the corner store can be such a pleasurable experience to be able to give that feeling, that inspiration we're getting about how wonderful life is, and give that to another human being, you know. And that can be with every moment of the day. When we're out there distributing books, that's what it is. You're trying to do everything you can within your human power and with the power Krishna is giving you to reach that soul with something it has not in this particular life come in contact with, that can be the very means for it to find eternal love, eternal satisfaction, eternal life, eternal fullness of satisfaction and experience, what human life is supposed to reveal to us. What we look at as the highest aim that we're saying is the best thing for all of humanity to look at, it's actually supposed to be the norm. You know, it's just like what we call common sense. We're saying there is such a thing as common sense, but if there was such a thing, that would mean everyone would have it. Right? So this thing also we aim at as love, being a high thing to aim for, it should be common. It should be. And so by preaching Bhagavatam, it can become common, can become the common goal. Rather than wanting to see the differences we have amongst ourselves, find the direct positives and direct magnificent aspects of the soul that we see in one another to unite us. Putting our differences aside, those will be melted into what we form as we take part in our activities with each other to serve the same goal. If we're serving the same goal, we can still have differences of perspectives. And our combined efforts be even more complete by that. So, the whole airplane doesn't have to be painted the same color. Maybe one person wants to paint the tail one color, another person wants to paint the wings another color. So, we've been called a steamship, right, on the ocean before. ISKCON is a boat, and Srila Prabhupada is the captain of the boat. So, we might be swapping them and mopping them sometimes. Sometimes we're cooking them. Sometimes we're feeding them. Sometimes we're distributing. Sometimes we're reading ourselves and absorbing. All these activities aim towards one end, love of God, pure love of God. John. And we can experience the taste of that love that's been put into preparation. Well, I have to say it's only as much as I put into it. But when Krishna glances upon it, that's what makes it complete. Even the restraints we have about our completeness with love for Krishna. When Krishna glances upon it, that's what is going to make it have the ability to transform the consciousness of our minds and our own ways of thinking. When we take prasadam, we can experience realization. You know, mostly when people go to have a meal, they're in advance even thinking in their minds what their tongue is going to get from it. But rarely do they have in their minds that it might philosophically affect their way of looking at life. But Krishna Prasadam can do that. Made with love, prepared with love for Krishna, that Prasadam can even have a big effect on our own feelings and our experience of what this taking in of spiritual food actually is. Prasadam is really special food. It is time to finish class. Any comments, any questions, any realizations? Why go any tie to in this age is because they're not accepting offenses.
Yeah.
See, what is amazing is that even though there has not been the same continual participation by as many devotees, we haven't stopped 6 offerings every day since it was first opened. Although we have reduced the amount of plates that go on the offerings. Now maybe we can return to that. But we can't offend Krishna. And Gaurnitai doesn't accept offenses. So due to the fact that our natures are such a way that they are, we think about the taste the food's going to be and these kinds of things with our mind while we're preparing food for Krishna, as if we're preparing it for ourselves. Sometimes we think we're preparing it for somebody else. And these are offensive, yes, people.
What do you mean by accept offenses?
Cause you to suffer from the effect of, to be able to be brought to the realization that it is not an act that is beneficial to spiritual advancement, I'll put it that way. You might think, see, we speak jokes in society as a means of having friendship with one another. We can make one another happy by that. But then we do that to religion. We use religion sometimes as a means to find frolic and fun with. We make jokes about people. We make jokes about political positions and these kinds of things. Now, there's room for that to some extent, to making points. If we want to have that kind of experience that creates advancement spiritually to the soul, then we pray to Krishna that we can use what we say for the purpose of helping people understand more broadly aspects of religion, aspects of society, political positions, and not to defame people or to degrade people or to blaspheme groups of people like that. See, and this is what's happening in society now. And this age is described as being an age in which by one word, people can take so much offense so as to want to kill you. You might speak of their ancestors that lived hundreds of years ago. Boom. So it can be anything that we take offense at too. But when Krishna takes offense, it's because the acts that we do are actually detrimental. So it creates attachment, some of these principles. Narad Muni gets really intimate details about what kind of cloth to wear on the altar, what kind of thoughts to think on the altar. So all these things are to break the false ego to where we realize we don't know what we're doing. We think we do. And we've been conditioned and told by our teachers that we have to know what we're doing. We know everything. We're God, basically. They're putting us in the position of God to make all the decisions for our life, to determine right and wrong for ourselves. These are all the concepts put into the mind of a child at very young ages. From growing up at 5 years old, he's starting to be told that in school. And nothing to do with God whatsoever. And so that's why love can't be taught. They will end up fighting. They have class love 101, probably the biggest fight coming out of that classroom because of the disagreements people have on what love is without God. So there'll be disturbances on what love is. Can't agree upon that. We create a war because we don't believe on what love is.
You can't have love without tolerance.
Yeah.
Tolerance these days are very diminishing.
The very thing they are making to be the strength of their belief in God is their narrow-minded perspective on their own beliefs. Yeah. And can't give credence to any other soul being at any other level except the one that they have been brought to have to go through that level. Yeah.
Besides that, it's a one-day-a-week religion.
And then it's one day a week. Yeah.
You know, this is every moment.
And you know, in Christianity, actually, when you get to that, it's somewhat got to be realized because they have the function of confession. So you do what you want through a week, and then you tell the Father what you did all week long, and then He forgives you and tells you how many prayers you got to pray.
Monday morning, you start over again.
And then you start all over Monday again. Yeah. But Catholicism, of course, is not the only form of that has taken that.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, it's the human condition, actually, that we are in, that we make mistakes, because we are all subject to make mistakes because of the lack of being born into perfect senses. But so, in order to correct this, then Krishna reveals what is offensive and then what is accepted. And then our minds lean in the right direction, and then we stop making offenses eventually. So, Shrimadbhagavatam, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.